Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this event. I can see that we have participants coming in, so I'll let you have a few minutes to just adjust and, join us for this event. And let me start a quick introduction before we begin. So as I said, welcome to our event, The Future of AI in Education. As you know, this topic is a quite relevant one that has been on our minds very much so lately. And I'm excited to be discussing it with you today, exploring it with you today, and hopefully finding out something more about this in our Reinventing Education series. As you know, Reinventing Education series is a part of our series, which we organize within the School of Humanity, which is organized on a weekly basis. Just a quick introduction, a little bit about me. I am a brand storytelling manager at School of Humanity. My full name is Isidora, but feel free to call me Izzy. I used to previously work at Ether Studio, which I was a co-owner of, and I had a strategy ads. I also worked at Rebello, which is an eco-conscious premium fashion brand, and I also worked with a small company called Adidas. I'm extremely passionate about innovation, about finding a true unique mission to a brand and making sure that its voice is being told and said out loud. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our today's panelists. First of all, we have Roger Spitz, who's the president of Techistentialism. Sorry if I butchered this. Then we have Emma, who is a learning science practitioner. She likes learning about, she explores the topic of AI within education, which is why we have her here today. And by night, she's also a director of CRD, which is a music publishing company. And we also have our own Hamza, who is a learner in our school at year 1 and is currently completing term 3 as our full-time high schooler of our fully online high school. So welcome, everyone. I will give you a couple of minutes to introduce yourself, starting with you, Roger. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
That's great. Thank you so much, Izzy, and great to be here today for this great event for the School of Humanity. So I'm Roger Spitz. I'm originally born in South Africa and spent most of my professional career in London. I was an investment banker for 20 years. I was global head of mergers and acquisitions, covering technology, advising CEOs, boards, and shareholders on the strategic M&A acquisitions in tech. And over the past 5-6 years, I've developed a keen interest in complexity, systems thinking, futures thinking, and decided to make the move and set up a Foresight practice where I focus on what is changing the world and how to build resiliency to adapt to these changes, thinking about next order implications, unexpected consequences, and technology is one of those many drivers of disruption. So that's my connection with AI. I also invest, write, and speak a lot about AI specifically.
Amazing. Roger was also our masterclass guest recently at School of Humanity, and everybody enjoyed his lecture. Next, we have Emma. Emma, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your connection to this topic.
Thank you so much, Izzy, and thank you so much to the team for the invite today. And I love that the CRD logo is here, because I think actually it sets up our discussion that really should be seen in a context of crossing across sectors and disciplines. And as Izzy says, I am a record producer in the classical world by night. By day, I am co-founder of a venture called Smart Learning Technologies, which is a venture that's looking to make learning meaningful. So working with students from the age of 16 to 25 in particular, who are navigating that moment in their education ordinarily around the world, moving from unstructured education to structured education. And in terms of the learning sciences work, what does that mean? Well, I am really interested in what's going on in the burgeoning field of the learning sciences, cognitive psychology, neuroscience, linguistics, and other fields that come together to create this rich field of the learning sciences. And I look at the evidence about how we best learn and connect that with practice, and that's about looking at any technology, pen, paper, and of course AI, and thinking about how those bits of research can be paired with the practice so we can best learn.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we got our Hamza. Hamza, tell us a little bit more about your connection to AI and your recent project.
Right. Good afternoon or evening. Hi, my name is Hamza, and I am thrilled to have this opportunity to address you today. During the event today, I would like to take you on a journey through the fascinating world of robotics and its rising impact on the workplace. So I myself am quite interested in technology, AI, all that stuff related to it. So last term, I decided to tackle the challenge of the rising of the robotics in the workplace by writing a policy recommendation paper in which solutions were recommended for solving the crisis of unemployment caused by the rise of robotics in the workplace.
Amazing. We just got a comment in the chat that said, so cool to have a student speak to us on the panel. So thank you for joining us. By the way, fun fact, at School of Humanity, we don't say students, we say learners, because we don't think they study, they always learn. Just a little fact for you. Okay, so I see that we're getting a lot of visitors right now, so I think we can kind of jump into one common activity, if you agree. So soon you will receive a poll that is as follows. So we will ask, which scenario do you think is the most likely to occur in the future, and why? Please vote for one which you think would be the most likely. And don't forget, there is no right or wrong answer. This is just to see what you guys think and what your experience is and what your prediction is. I can see there are some votes coming in, which are unanimous. All right. Amazing.
Izzy, I'm being swayed by what everyone else is responding.
It's the confirmation bias in us, isn't it? We like to agree with others. Yeah, let's take a little bit more time. I can see we're almost halfway through. There are different applications to it. It is just a level of, utility and complexity on how we can implement this. I'm really curious to see what others are thinking. Were you saying, Emma, I'm kind of Philip says all of the above. Yes. One can say it's a trick question because yes, it can be utilized for everything, but we want you to vote for your favorites. Amazing. Well, I think we got a unanimous winner out of the 5, if I'm not mistaken. I think we definitely agree majorly that the AI would go for Philip says this is the AI version of him. Yes, this would be fun in the future. I think this is a human element that we don't want to replace with an AI. But I think we can unanimously say that, yeah, we got another all of the above. Yes, as I said, these are all situations in which it can be implemented. But what I can see, and maybe this is the education bias, is that a lot of people think that AI will be creating customized learning plans. So the option number 2 for our learners. And I want to ask you guys, why? Why did you give the response that you gave? If you answered this, why did you answer this? And we got some people saying, I want to choose more than one. Why did you choose the one that you chose? I can first be asking the panelists. I'm quite curious to know what you guys think. What about you, Emma? What would you vote for?
Oh, this, so I have to say my eye was drawn to the 24/7 support, because if we think of AI as a huge opportunity to release a really big pain point, which is time poor educators, I guess that's the one I'm drawn to as also something I'm working on, to really deliver wraparound support. Because as you're saying about students and learners, it's not just about being sat in a classroom, it's about 24/7 learning, right? The learning might happen when you're walking and you suddenly realize, oh, I've had this eureka moment about a topic and I want to check in whether this is right. And of course, we don't want to get into this world where we're WhatsApping our lecturers or teachers at 11 p.m. at night. So not that they're going to be replaced, but this idea of the 24/7 support in a controlled and managed and complementary fashion to a human educator, I think is a really compelling one.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. It is something that's humanely either very difficult to source or almost like it's very difficult for a human being to be 24/7 on point to kind of respond to all the needs. Jamie, thank you for raising your hand. However, we will be having breakout rooms where we'll have more discussions. So I want to ask every single one of you, but we simply don't have the time. I'm quite curious to hear what, Roger, will you have to say on this topic? What would you think would be the best choice?
Yeah, so it's tricky. I mean, many are relevant. We live in a world of tensions and dilemmas and contradictions and that. But I personally think the customization and the tailoring was the one that resonated with me. I think in the same way as Emma talked about time, which is really a big constraint, I think one of the other big constraints in my mind is how universal the teaching might be, but how unique all the learners are. And so that ability to tweak, tailor, adapt, I think can go some way to managing also the constraints of the teachers, the teaching, and the students themselves or the learners.
Agreed. And as Maura said in the chat, I need to quote, she says there are so many teaching strategies available. Having AI available to best match strategy to learner would be so beneficial. So we do see this element of personalization and having AI implemented in multiple cases. All right, let me quickly move on, and we'll go back to this discussion soon because we have a lot of questions for you guys today. But let's just see how AI world looks right now. So firstly, we do see that 27,000 people signed the open letter in March to stop AI research. So we do see a lot of fear instigated in people from the new.
Sorry to interrupt, your slides aren't changing. I think you need to click on
them. Is this okay?
Yes, it's working now.
Amazing. I think my computer is just not working with me today. Apologies. So yeah, there's a lot of fear obviously instigated within people. And then what we also see is that even 24 educational institutions officially prohibited the use of any AI tools, with even the governments threatening a ban, which we, for example, seen in Italy. However, we do see that 62% of students admitted to using AI tools for cheating. And I'm using this in quotes because they did help them with writing their thesis and their, their works and any of their productive works. But and a lot of people argue that this will diminish their critical thinking and their linguistic abilities as well. However, on the other side, and this is something that a friend of mine who works in education came to me and expressed his frustration that he was sitting with 4 educational professionals in a room where they brainstormed or designed an entire session for 5 hours, which they had to design. And he, as a test, went back home and gave exactly the same instruction to ChatGPT, and it created a more detailed work than the 4 of them managed to do within those 5 hours. So this would increase their productivity massively had they used it in learning design. We also see 2 universities in the UK, one of which Cambridge, publicly coming out and spoke for ChatGPT use, obviously under certain conditions. So there are still, even weak, there is a movement to accept this new technology that is revolutionizing the way we work. And finally, it's not just learners that are using it, it's even teachers. 40% of teachers admit to using it at least once a week. And I'm guessing a lot of you guys who just joined us today, you've used it at least once this week, especially in designing quizzes, maybe finding out topics or interesting questions to spark curiosity. I know I used it when designing this session. So there is no doubt that it's a beautiful, somebody says 30 minutes ago. Darren says never used it. I'm very interested to hear whether Darren is a pro or con. And I think we can all agree it is flooding our media sources, whether it's good or bad, whether the news are positive or negative. Do we see like a positive or negative wave of its influence on the entire industries, not just on education, and it still keeps coming. However, we need to ask ourselves 3 main questions in order to make sure that we make the right decision when it comes to AI in education. The first question is, do you think that AI makes learning experience better? The second question is, should we ban AI tools in schools or should we embrace it? And then the third question is, what are the best ways to regulate and monitor the use of AI in education? I think these 3, if we manage to answer them today, we will go very, very far in terms of understanding our educational system. So I would like to first ask our panelists what your thoughts would be on these 3 questions. And I'm going to start this time with Emma, because ladies first, because we know that you have extensive knowledge on the topic of learning, on the topic of why, how, and what of learning, retaining knowledge. This is one of the fields of your extensive research. What do you think would be potential challenges on relying too hard on AI in education? And how do you think we can mitigate those risks?
Thanks, Izzy. So over the past few months, I've actually been working with a super group of SOH learners, one of whom I think I can spot in the room. And we've been workshopping this idea of how to best use AI. In short, I think my answer to these 3 questions, and then to come back to the mitigation of risks, is, can AI make learning experiences better? Possibly. Should we ban it? No. Ways to regulate it? Education. And that education piece, I think, sits at the heart. What are the risks? We could sit here and indeed we could probably ask ChatGPT itself or another AI tool what the risks are, but they have been circling around privacy, but also, as you were saying, Izzy, this concern that we're outsourcing deep learning, deep thinking. Coming back to where my work sits and the mindful use of any tech, if we take index cards as an example, because we've got an AI version of it through Quizlet, index cards can be a hugely powerful way of learning, because you have to actively select your information. You go through a process of often matching a term with a definition or a translation if it's used for language learning. And then there's hopefully the action of spaced repetition. So this idea that our long-term memory is built out of seeing information at one point and then repeatedly coming back to it. With Quizlet, that can be a really powerful way of doing this in an accelerated way. However, it's only powerful, I would argue, if you use such a tool, and indeed if you do index cards in a mindful and meaningful way. So speaking from experiences, when I was a younger learner, I would create huge numbers of index cards, but I wouldn't always question if I understood what I was writing on them. So it would be regurgitation, so facts without the understanding. And I think that is where our challenge sits, is that if we go to these tools and think, oh, fantastic, I can do short-term outcomes without thinking about the long-term learning about metacognition, the knowing about knowing, I think that's where we'll really fall down, because we have to remember that we are all humans using these tools. And as humans, it means that our learning conditions can change depending on our environment. I was sharing with the panelists at the beginning that I'm a little jet lagged after a long haul flight. So if I were to sit down and do some language learning, which is my kind of bread and butter, I'd be super aware that I'd need to condition that learning, and I'd need to be really mindful as to whether I'm doing active learning. So that's not just being busy, but being cognitively active. So in sum, I think we keep cycling back to this idea that education sits at the heart of how we can make the learning experience better, how we can avoid schools and others banning it, and how we can best regulate for it. That's if we have a grounded discussion that takes into account all stakeholders and, most importantly, the learners themselves.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And I love that. I love that you've mentioned the understanding, not just the learning for memorization. Since Philip did mention that acquisition of knowledge is obsolete, I would say what you mentioned is to understand the process, so that's more of an acquisition of skills rather than hard facts, for example. Yeah, I want to refer back to Roger, maybe just to kind of continue on that from a little bit of a a different standpoint. So Roger, you've advised CEOs, founders, shareholders on many strategic decisions. What advice would you give to high school principals and administrators who are considering incorporating AI into their schools? What should they take into consideration?
Sure, thanks, Izzy. So, and as an aside, agree with everything that Emma said. I think these are very important points around every aspect. So I wouldn't necessarily look at AI or education any differently from the way I would approach making sense of our environment, the possibilities, the threats, and deciding what response to have towards that environment. I think AI has two aspects which I think are extremely important of framing maybe the implications. One is the potential for irreversibility. I think, like climate and some of the other complex problems, if you reach certain thresholds or milestones with AI, these might be difficult or impossible to reverse. So I think the special nature of the potential for irreversibility is an important frame for how we might make decisions and what advice we might give. And the second element is the fact that it has a direct implication on decision-making. In other words, unlike for the 18th or 19th or 20th century in an existential world where humans pretty much had exclusivity on decision-making, today, our existence, our freedom, agency, and choice, in a sense, cohabitates with machines. So our existence is an existence in the technological world, and our decision-making, it's human, but there's also algorithmic decision-making. So the impact, I think, is very significant in terms of what impact it has on our own decision-making, and are we ensuring that we're building our capability to make decisions better. The two or three other sort of filters I then use to providing advice is the first one, when you look at systems or transformational change in complex systems, and I think our world is a complex system, education is a complex system, the assumptions we make about the world, the way we see the world, the education we receive, what we learn, that filter to the world is the most significant driver for change, more than policy, more than regulations, more than structures or incentives. So I think Emma also mentioned this in terms of the best ways to regulate and monitor. It actually, a lot of it, whatever you do in terms of education is going to be the most effective to drive the transformational changes you want. The second thing that I would look at as a filter is really just thinking about the nature of AI. In a sense, it's moved from what we might call the black elephant, what known unknowns, is effectively the idea of an elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is something that's very highly likely, but people can sort of pretend it's not there. It's a little bit like the movie Don't Look Up for asteroids or the climate. And here AI is a little bit the Don't Look Up to my perspective with education. So that elephant in the room, or black elephants, as we sometimes use as futurists, where you have things that are imminent, but still you can kind of just ignore the elephant in the room, have turned into what we call, in again futurist parlance, gray rhino. And the difference between a black elephant and a gray rhino is that AI is a known now with open AI, with ChatGPT and the large language models. And what I mean by that is that the gray rhino, unlike the elephant, which is just there, which you can maybe ignore, you know the implications slightly better now. We don't know everything, but we know, because we've all used it, the power of AI, which maybe some months ago, many just chose to ignore, because we have tangible use cases that we've all been playing with that show that it's now a known feature. So the gray rhino is charging at us, and we can either choose to ignore that gray rhino or we can adapt. My personal view, and the advice I give CEOs for these situations where gray rhino is charging of us, whether it's COVID, whether it's generative AI, or whatever it is not to ignore it and to go to the root causes, to think about the iceberg model, what is above the surface, what is below the surface. And if you dig below the surface, I think it's very clear that the world has known that the elephant in the room is that the skills needed for the future are not the skills that we're learning in most conventional schools. When you think about analytical thinking, when you think about active learning or even learning teaching strategies, when you think about complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, originality, the list is long in terms of what the World Economic Forum and many others write their reports every year as to what are the skills needed. And basically, just like the Don't Look Up or the elephant in the room, those have been ignored. I think the opportunity of the gray rhino charging at us now is to think below the surface at the root causes and revisit effectively what education should be and what are we doing about this list of top skills that are meant to be required for survival, to stay relevant in the 21st century, to understand complexity and systems. And what are we doing, and how is the educational system fulfilling the ability to achieve and to reach and to develop, to learn, unlearn, and relearn the skills required? And so my big question is not so much above the surface, the regulation, the pausing, the not pausing. Those are essential. Please don't get me wrong. Ethics are essential. We need to regulate. We need to monitor. We need to be very thoughtful about all that. But that is not the root cause, and it's not a substitute for addressing how to prepare learners for the complexities, uncertainties, and nonlinearity of the 21st century. And so the advice I would give, and we can unpack this a bit later, I'll maybe pause for a minute because it not to sort of overshoot on my response or my time, but the advice I would give is to go to the root causes, to address the educational system in a way where we're developing the skills that are required, and in a way where ChatGPT, as many other technologies or other drivers of change, are there, they exist. There's sides approaches which will regulate and monitor them. But really, fundamentally, what are we doing as humans? What are we doing as humans to continue to stay relevant, to continue to be able to make decisions in our complex world? And that requires a reshaping of the educational system. And I don't see enough debate around that. I don't see anybody thinking about how relevant it is. We're almost trying to sort of look at the surface and just see how we plug in AI and if we do it or don't, and just keeping the assumption that the rest of the system is fine and not even addressing those. And so that for me would be the biggest advice.
I love that. I mean, there is so much value to unpack in that. And as Emma said, we can have essentially another separate chat where we could discuss this. Love that you mentioned Don't Look Up. I love the irony of the movie. It's like just banning the problem, telling everyone, don't look at what's happening right now, just focus on your studying, as if tomorrow when they join the workforce, the AI is not going to be there. But we know now for sure that this is not going to be the case. I love that. Thank you so much for that response, for the amount of detail that you shared with us. But now, and I know that a lot of people love that we have our learner with us today. And Hamza, I have two questions for you. Firstly, you've done a project that deals with robotics in the workplace, for which you've written a policy. I want to hear a little bit of insights on how this sort of new revolution, new industrial revolution is going to change the way we work, and what your insights were. And my second question is, how is your experience as a learner at School of Humanity with the use of AI? What's your praxis been so far, and what did you learn from it?
Right. Regarding the first question, I think the key lies in embracing the change and evolving with it together and progressing further. It's kind of inevitable if you look at it. I mean, the speed at which the AI has advanced, it's almost as if you're talking to a real human. So I think that opens a new chapter for AI and education. And yeah, that's generally what I'd like to say on that. On the topic. And regarding the second question, which was about kind of the integration of AI into our learning system, we have a balance between the two of them, AI and our own critical thinking and problem solving skills. It depends on the type of work we are doing. For example, sometimes we might do research that would require us to gain a bit of insight by asking AI. And sometimes it's different. They encourage us to research ourselves and find the solution for it. Yeah.
Right. What do you think from your perspective? Should schools ban AI tools, or should they embrace it? What would you say? And why, of course?
Yeah, I mean, I think they should embrace it because, again, the future is unpredictable, and who knows, AI might become something essential, just like our phones and stuff, like the internet. So I think it at some point it needs to be integrated into the overall learning system, so that people can, keep a balance between being up to date and also focusing on their own path. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Emma, thank you for beating me to it. I really did want to ask you about your collaborative project with SOH. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about it? And also, I'm quite curious to know, do you think that this resistance towards the AI is this, evergreen kind of resistance of human nature towards anything new that comes to the market? Or do you think it's valid? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, good question. So if I can start at the end, I think the resistance, dare I say, is not Hamza, but us. I think there is a curious thing about being in education and the fear of vulnerability and fears of unknowns. And in an conventional education setting, we're normally in control. We're standing up in the front of a class, we're in control of what's being delivered, and the idea of being caught out or not knowing what's coming can feel very uncomfortable. So I think that seems to be a big challenge. It's the mindset not of Gen Z, those who are coming up, and then to use it as a segue to the project. Hamza, I have to twist your arm to join if you've got time. So we're still running. And what we've been looking at is the big question. So the hypothesis is, how do we best learn with AI? Can we learn better with AI tools? And each learner has identified an area that they're particularly interested in. So one has been AI in language learning. One has been AI and productivity or organization for learning. And we had a great session last week on AI and content creation. And throughout all of these sessions that we've been recording, and they will be released as a podcast mini-series. So it's very much a record, document, share, and continue the conversation project. And throughout each of these topics and contexts of uses of AI, we've been taking a model that I built out of the Bloom's cognitive taxonomy, which is the critical learning cycle. So really, and going to what you were saying, Roger, about those critical 21st century skills, of which criticality is one, we've been trying to use this as a cycle to really think through very carefully and mindfully as we evaluate tools in different settings. And honestly, well, it goes without saying, Hamza, you're absolutely another example, but the students have been really, learners, forgive me, have been really forthcoming and have come forward with some really important insights. And the sum of this project has really been AI can be hugely important, but it isn't the end point. It's another tool. It's another aspect of our toolkit if we can use them meaningfully.
I love that. If we find meaning to it, I'm sure we'd be able to apply it. I love the one I think that got mentioned in the chat, where the comparison between a calculator in the 70s came up by Kesha. Apologies if I'm butchering your name, and I really feel a similar way. I feel like if we do work with AI jointly, we will be able to create magic. Right, let's deep dive into a couple more I would say problems or challenges that we face right now with AI in education. And I first intended these to be also like an education, conversation-based questions. However, I can see that the audience is super engaged. So what we're going to do is we're going to create breakout rooms. I'm sure that everyone wants to kind of turn on their cameras and discuss and make sure that they share their thoughts. I invite all the panelists to join whichever breakout room they find fit, which I will share with you today. So we have 3 questions, which are very, I would say, like hot topic right now when it comes to AI in education. And these are as follows. First one, is the fear of AI taking over human jobs and potentially jobs of teachers and education justified? Or are there any ways that AI can complement human teachers in high school, such as what we all voted upon, creating additional learning material? Another question would be, how can AI be used to scale quality education to 8 billion humans globally? We know that our education needs revolutionized, and how can we revolutionize it and then make it super accessible by using AI? And finally, how can high schools ensure that they're using AI in an ethical and responsible way, especially when it comes to collecting and using students' data? This refers in particular to 24-hour chatbots, school systems, and so on and so forth, which are minor data and very sensitive information.
Thanks, Laura.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Let me just quickly share all the questions. I just want to hear, whether it be in the chat or as a comment, how did you enjoy the breakout rooms? Was it fun for you? Was it an engaging experience? Amazing. Not long enough. Oh my God. I'm so sorry for that. I know that many people were interrupted mid-sentence. I want to amazing. So I want to hear any kind of insights from room one. What it 30 hours more, please. Love that. Is there any sort of main insights that you had? And please either raise your hand if you wanna share with us, or put it in the chats. That would be great. Let me ask any of our panelists, have you been in the room one?
Yes, I was there.
Amazing. And so how did the discussion go? What was the key points that you can bring out from the room one discussion?
Sure, and I'll try and also answer a question Michelle had for me and the group. So, well, everybody can see the question of room one. So, is there a fear of AI taking over human jobs in education justified? I think broadly, I felt it was a good number of educators in the room, and the feeling was no, that there were obviously many of the human elements of teaching and that the shift needed to be focusing on those, and that to some degree AI could help. There was, of course, very important points being made around the dangers of AI, the need for ethics, the frameworks, and points Michelle were raising, which are ultimately the developers for AI are focusing very much on shareholder primacy, their shareholders, and not necessarily the broader stakeholders, including learners, educators, the students, etc. And I think Michelle had a question for me, if I'm understanding correctly, in relation to that, as to what I think. And I think unfortunately she's right. I think today we live in a shareholder primacy world. I think there is more scrutiny than ever by organizations, by the transparency which technology allows, paradoxically. So there's more spotlight on ethics and that. It doesn't mean that we're moving towards taking everything into account, but I think there's more scrutiny. I would say that for me, it boils down to the difference between point solutions, i.e. just something which is a nice shiny object, which emanates from Silicon Valley or wherever, versus systemic transformation versus transformational innovation. And I think for these complex topics like education, ultimately it boils down to elements which I obviously didn't have time to unpack earlier, but which is thinking systemically and including what are the next order implications of what's happening, how do things connect, how do we make the distinction between unanticipated and unexpected. Unanticipated consequences maybe could be thought about beforehand with anticipatory governance. Unexpected, technology evolves and not everything can be thought about beforehand. So it's really that distinction between being anticipatory, being ethical, thinking systemically versus just point solutions and shareholder primacy. And I'm hoping that the world will move the cursor gradually, but it's slow and not necessarily effective, because the main thing that determines the outcome these days are incentives, and the incentives are skewed towards shareholders and just doing point solutions and shiny objects, as opposed to thinking more systemically.
I love that. Thank you for that answer. And I can already see the room too is sharing their insights as well. So it says that AI would essentially aid scalability, but for now, we're not so certain. Room number 3, does anyone want to volunteer and share any insights from it? Okay, Emma says, huge promise from the room 2, public-private. This is a new importance of incremental. I love that. So just, keep going the lean method, keep gradually improving onto it. Ken, yes, just a side note for everyone, that everyone who registered will actually receive a recording of the session. So yeah, don't worry, you will receive it very, very soon. From the room 3, I think the main discussion was really that just with everything else, the lure of data is always there, and there is always a need for regulation for data. So as Jamie pointed out very correctly, we do need a system that is going to be essentially closed and not allowing all of this data to siphon out of the organization, especially since we deal with a lot of minors data in lower and middle educational systems. I hope I translated that well. Unfortunately, we're not going to have any time for Q&A because we've come to time. But I thank everyone, since you've been such a nice, engaging audience, and very, very many thanks to our panelists, Roger, Emma, and Hamza. Thank you for your insights. It's been more than lovely. Goodbye. Have a nice rest of the day.